The third week of the Dale Warner murder trial is now underway in Lenawee County. Thanks for joining us here on WTOL 11+. I'm Dan Cummins.
And I'm Kaylee Marentet. This is a case our team has been following since Dale's wife Dee first went missing nearly 5 years ago. Tonight on WTOL 11+, we're taking you inside the courtroom as testimonies continue and the prosecution works to build up their case against Dale.
Plus, we're breaking down exactly what the strategy is for a case like this and what challenges both sides will face over the next several weeks. All part of our in-depth analysis as we're joined by former assistant prosecutor and a current assistant professor of law at the University of Toledo, David Harold.
But first, trial today focused heavily on anhydrous ammonia tanks, surveillance video, and forensic analysis.
Melissa Andrews begins our extended coverage tonight, and Adrian with the new developments in court as we enter week 3.
The jury has a field trip tomorrow morning. They will visit the Munger Road farm where Dee and Dale Warner lived, plus the Paragon Road property where the tank was found. So there will be no court and no streaming tomorrow. The first witness of the day, War Ag Farms employee Jason Gravel, testified that he regularly moved tanks on the property and believes he may have transported a tank to the spray barn on April 27th. But under cross-examination, Gravel acknowledged a prior brain bleed has affected his memory. When asked by a juror, he confirmed Dale Warner did direct him to move that tank. Dee Warner's nephew, Parker Hardy, told jurors he noticed unusual tire tracks for the front loader leading directly up to the Warner home the day Dee was reported missing. He also testified he later saw a rusty anhydrous tank inside the spray barn, something he described as unusual for the farm. Hardy says when he questioned Dale about it, he was told employees were bringing tanks in at night so he could repaint them because he couldn't sleep.
He told me that he had some of his employees bring in some tanks at night or at some point so that he could paint them at night. He said he was having trouble sleeping because he was worried about where his wife was.
An FBI digital forensic examiner testified he enhanced muffled body camera audio recorded on the evening of April 27th. The audio was taken after the lead detective Kevin Greca removed his body camera and placed it in his car and shut the door. The enhanced audio was still not clear, but you could hear him talking to Jaron Warner, Dale's son, about bringing dogs and drones to execute a search warrant just before he removed his body cam. Detective Dale Sharp testifies he was on the property at the time and that Detective Greca told him that they should let Dale continue his work on the farm and not interfere as they searched. Former Madison Township Fire Chief Ryan Rank, who is part of the county drone team, testified he captured aerial video of Dale Warner operating a front loader and hauling an anhydrous tank that same night. The final witness of the day, a certified welding inspector qualified as an expert, testified the tank showed an obvious repair weld. He estimated cutting and re-welding the tank could have been completed by one person in under 2 hours using professional grade equipment.
The UV light that's produced in the welding arc is extremely intense, and it can burn uncovered skin relatively quickly. That is very indicative of what a burn from UV light produced by the welding arc would look like, especially if one was wearing a glove on the hand.
Under cross-examination, he acknowledged he cannot say who performed the weld, only that it was not a factory weld.
You can be the first to hear about the major developments in this case. All you have to do is get out your phone and text the word trial to the number you see on your screen. That's 419-248-1100. Then our team will send you links to our stories with trial updates as soon as we get them. Plus, you can read up more on this case's history and the disappearance and discovery of Dee Warner.
Joining us now to offer some legal insight into all of this is former assistant prosecutor and current assistant professor at the University of Toledo's College of Law, David Harold. Thank you for joining us and being with us here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So we are heading now into week 3 of the Dale Warner murder trial. From a testimony standpoint, the jurors have heard a lot. What part of, I guess, of the phase of this trial that we're in, this is projected to be a 9-week trial. This is week 3. About what point do you think we're at right now?
Well, it's hard to tell. When you have a trial of this depth, it's a circumstantial case. There are certain aspects that the prosecution concentrates on when you have a case that's based primarily on circumstantial evidence, which is that testimony has to lead toward motive, opportunity, and means. So since we have so many witnesses, it's like putting together a puzzle. And each witness is commenting on a certain piece of that puzzle, going toward whether it's motive, opportunity, or means. So in that regard, as the trial develops, what you'll see is witnesses speaking to each one of those issues. So right now, from a prosecutorial point of view, they're in the midst of it, and it's just about putting together a logical construct for the jury to follow, a story that they can understand what happened and why.
We were talking a little bit before that this, like you had mentioned, this is a circumstantial trial. No one was there when they saw Dee killed. How do you, as a prosecutor, prove something in a case that is circumstantial?
Seldom do you have cases where especially a murder, where you have first-hand witness, because there's only two individuals that know what happened, the victim who can't testify and a defendant who won't. And in that regard, or very likely will not. And in that context, you have to put things together. You have to create that puzzle where different pieces are showing that, so you're in a way providing for the jury a way to envision what happened. So it's far more common, especially in murder cases, for it to be circumstantial in nature. I mean, there are cases where people witness crimes, but murders happen to not be one of those normally.
I'm curious, you mentioned this as a puzzle, and I think that's very good visually, where you have all these pieces and you have, like, these documents and these video cameras and these text messages. How do you even start when you have all of that in a case like this? What are, like, some of the first steps that you think would be taken?
Well, every prosecutor approaches a case in their own unique way, and a lot of it is just wrapping your head around the amount of evidence. And a prosecutor is going to look at all the text messages and read all of those and look at all the scientific evidence, go over the autopsy report. And once the prosecutor has looked at all those pieces of evidence, that's when the charging decision is made, and you put together traditionally what's called a trial notebook, which highlights the different pieces of evidence that you want to introduce and how.
What do you think are some of the biggest hurdles right now for the prosecution?
Well, the hurdle remains the same, whether it's at the start or at the end of trial, which is proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And what a prosecutor is doing during the course of a trial is, again, putting together the pieces of evidence to create that larger picture of what occurred. So the hurdles remain the same, and it's just an incremental process of illustrating proof for the jury.
So it is week 3, and these jurors have heard a lot. There's been a lot of things shown to these jurors from evidence-wise and a lot of witness testimonies. Is there any psychology behind keeping these jurors? I would imagine day in and day out, you're sitting in the jury box listening to all this. Is there any psychology behind the prosecutors keeping these jurors engaged and making sure they're following along with this story and essentially this puzzle?
Well, certainly. I mean, as each witness, because one witness is not going to explain the entire trial. So necessarily different individuals are going to provide the pieces of evidence that they have. And in long trials, and I will tell you that jurors actively want to follow along. They want to come to a fair and just result. So they're going to be incredibly attentive. And even in long trials, because as the trial unfolds, they're taking that information and remembering it, and then as other pieces of information comes in, they put them all together. And then ultimately what you'll see at the end of the trial is the summation of the prosecutor, and defense for that matter, where they'll tie all those pieces together and show how everything works.
I know one question that a lot of us in the newsroom have been wondering is some cases like this, someone like Dale would take the stand. Do you see him possibly taking the stand in this case? Why or why not?
Well, there's really no way of knowing, and that is one decision that is entirely the defendants. Sometimes defendants want to explain to a jury why they're not guilty. Other times it more falls on the state to, and the argument the defense will make is that the state didn't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. So really the only person who knows whether or not Dale Warner is testifying is Dale Warner.
Wow. And do you think they will go into this trial, yes, I want to take the stand, or do you think that's a decision that will come later on as this trial continues?
Again, that's hard to call.
It's a case by case.
It is. It's truly a case by case situation, and it's until it's time for the defendant to choose whether or not to testify. It's an evolving situation as well.
We are in the midst of witness testimonies for the prosecution. Mm-hmm. What are the next steps after this?
You mean after the prosecution closes its case in chief? After the prosecution closes its case in chief, the defense will put on their case. They have the option to put on witnesses, including Dale Warner, if he so chooses to testify. And sometimes the defense chooses to just make the argument that there wasn't enough proof shown by the prosecution. After that, there are closing arguments. The jury will be instructed as to the law for the two different counts, two different types of counts, and then they'll deliberate and ultimately reach a verdict.
Speaking of reaching a verdict, if you were in the jury box in this case, what do you think are some of the biggest things you'd be looking for?
Like I mentioned before, jurors want to do the right thing, mm-hmm. and they want to pay attention, and they want to make sure that they're reaching a fair and just result. So they're discovering the case much like we are on a day-by-day basis. And again, they want to come to a fair and just result. So it's in their hands.
Mm-hmm. With this case being such a high-profile case, I mean, we've had national news outlets here. This is getting a lot of attention. It's been something that's caught the public's attention for 5 years since she went missing. Do you think there is that extra pressure on prosecutors and defense attorneys knowing that there are so many eyes on this case?
What I can say to that with the idea of high profile is every case from a prosecutorial point of view to the victim is a high-profile case. It's the most important case that they're going to experience. Mm-hmm. Here, the family and in the community. And same thing from a defense point of view, that every case where a defendant is on trial is the most important case to that individual. So in that regard, how you prepare for a case as a prosecutor, how you prepare for it in defense really doesn't change. The state still has to meet the elements of the offenses charged, and the defense would counter those. So in that regard, the fact that there are cameras really doesn't change from a practical point of view how the state puts together its case and how defense against it.
Very interesting. Is there anything else you want to add about this case, or any insight you would want to give to people who are following along on this?
No, I think when you're watching the case, just to be patient, mm-hmm. and to sort of meet each day's testimony as it is, and to do what the jury does, just listen and see what the evidence shows with an open mind, and ultimately at the end of the trial, you can make your determination.
All right, Professor David Harold here with us from the University of Toledo. Thanks for joining us here and giving us so much insight on this.
Let's turn now to what's next in this trial. As you heard Melissa Andrews mention at the top of our coverage, tomorrow jurors will visit the Munger Road property and Pargan Road property where the Dee's body was found. The judge says this will help the jurors understand the evidence that's been provided so far. The judge says access to the site will be restricted for the public and media. There's also restrictions on video and photos.
That's why tomorrow we will not have the trial live streamed on WTOL 11+. However, once the restrictions are lifted and the trial resumes inside the courthouse later this week, our live coverage will resume. We'll also have our next extended coverage streaming coming up at Friday after the news at 6. Until then, you can stream Hidden in Plain Sight, the disappearance and discovery of Dee Warner, anytime on WTOL 11+. 11 Investigate sat down with Dee's family and broke down the entire investigation in our special 30-minute presentation.
That'll do it for us tonight. Make sure to follow us all on social media platforms and download our free WTOL 11 News app on your phone to get breaking news alerts and updates in this trial sent right to you.
Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.